Warning, we are not your attorneys. Please, don't take anything we say as legal advice. I'm Geoff.
I'm Mike.
And I'm Derrick.
And you are listening to the Not So Grand Jury,
which is now sponsored by Morwa P. LLC.
This episode, we're continuing to talk about Season 1 of The Lincoln Lawyer.
All right, guys. Welcome back. Part 2 of our discussion on the remaining of Season 1 of The Lincoln Lawyer. If you missed Part 1, I'd highly recommend you go back and listen to it. And also make sure you have actually watched The Lincoln Lawyer, because that will be very helpful for purposes of listening into this conversation. We're going to talk about, let's go back. Let's talk. So in part 1, we talked about the Trevor Elliott trial. We got into a lot about not only the pre-trial and the voir dire, but the actual trial, the verdict, all that fun stuff. We had a great time. So I hope you watched it and I hope you enjoyed it. This time we're going to talk about the other things that sort of came up over the course of Season 1. And then we will give, and I know you've been waiting for it, the all-important rankings of enjoyment for the entire Season 1, as well as our opinions on the legal realities. What makes sense, guys? You want me to go first and talk about whatever the heck was going on with Eli Wyms, or Geoff, do you want to sort of take the 12-step program thing? Because I know that's sort of where we all started, but it's up to you. What do you guys want to do?
I mean, chronologically, why don't we start with the 12-step program? Because that is, I guess, comes earlier in the show.
It does. Yeah.
So, Geoff, you want to get that going?
Sure.
Cool.
So,
all right. So Geoff, take it away. The soapbox is yours, as it were.
Indeed. And I'm surprised I haven't talked about this issue on the podcast previously. And we're actually going to touch back a little bit on some stuff that happened in episode 1, because the whole reason that Mickey is in this situation is because a year and a half prior to when the show starts, he was suffering from substance use disorder and had an accident, injured himself. Or no, I'm sorry. Let me reverse that. He was in an accident, and as a result of the treatment, he wound up with a substance use disorder. He left the practice of law briefly, for a year, and when Jerry Vincent leaves him his practice at the start of the show, the judge that is the assignment judge for I guess it's LA County. I don't know that. It must be.
Yeah, she's the presiding judge, so she's in charge of.
She asks him some questions about that, and specifically, he says that he is in recovery and he's going to meetings. And we see this come up a few times throughout the season. He's tempted a few times to drink, although my understanding is his addiction was to painkillers, not to alcohol. But we'll set that aspect of things aside. But the interesting point to me is that the judge asks him about what treatment he's getting, and he mentions he's in meetings. The meetings in the show are 12-step meetings, your standard Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, that are very prevalent. If anyone is being treated for substance abuse, whether it's alcohol or drugs or anything like that, it's always the 12-step programs.
Okay, welcome to the 9 o'clock meeting. Is there anybody new that would like to start this evening? Anybody at all?
My name is Michael. And I'm an addict.
And I wanted to highlight this issue because there are other programs that don't involve religion. And I mentioned that because very often, and here we have a judge asking whether or not he's going to meetings.
Everyone is still in shock over Mr. Vincent's murder. My husband knew him a little. Mitch Lester, he's a defense attorney also. He was at a memorial for Mr. Vinton this past week.
Oh, and he saw me there.
It's not just my concern. The State Bar is aware of your situation.
I didn't fall off the wagon, if that's what you're asking. I've been going to meetings. I have paperwork I can bring.
Oh, no, that won't be necessary. I've had family members with these issues, Mr. Haller. My father lived with it his whole life, so I just want to make sure there isn't a problem that perhaps I could help with.
Oh, no, I appreciate that, Judge. But no, there's no problem.
Very often people are forced into programs because of something that has happened to him in the past. If, for instance, his accident was the result of his substance use disorder and not the precipitating event that caused his substance use disorder, he might have been forced by the courts to go into a 12-step program, and that is unconstitutional. We see this a lot even in the professional setting where I myself have fielded... Yes, Mike?
I guess we should add it's unconstitutional because 12-step programs are inherently tied to religious practices.
Yes, 12-step programs because of the specific steps that say surrendering your will to a higher power. And there's even, if you go, the sort of foundational document of the 12-step programs is called the Big Book. And in chapter 4, which is titled We Agnostics, it basically talks about how if you're not willing to accept belief in a God, then you're doomed to an alcoholic death. You're being closed-minded, you'll never recover, and you'll be doomed to an alcoholic death. And as a result of that and the way that these programs are generally administered, courts around the country have said the government can't coerce you into this. And I wanted to highlight it here because, not because he's being forced to go into any meetings. It doesn't seem like the judge isn't telling him, have you gone to AA meetings? She's asking, are you in treatment? Are you receiving treatment? But I've fielded complaints from doctors, pilots, attorneys. This could happen to teachers, where the government is in charge of your ability to do your job. The government licenses all three of us. And when the government has that authority over you and can essentially take away your livelihood if you don't attend specifically 12-step meetings, they are violating your rights. And I wanted to use this as an opportunity to really talk about the fact that part of the problem is not that judges or the court system thinks that the 12 steps are the only effective way of doing this. It's that for the most part, our culture is unaware that there are other options. And there are things like smart recovery, SOS, just one-on-one therapy and medication.
I think a lot of people are unaware that the 12-step program is religiously tied. If you're not, if you've never been there, or if you never knew anything about it, you just hear 12-step program and think, oh, that's Alcoholics Anonymous. They're to help people get treatment.
Yeah. And but the fact of the matter is that it is very closely tied to religion. Now, someone running a meeting could conceivably run it in such a way where it is, not specifically theocratic. You'll see we may get somebody tweeting or responding to this topic saying, well, the higher power can be the universe or water, fire, it can be a doorknob or wizards if you want. And all of that is great. But when you do that, how do you surrender your will to the universe or fairies, doorknobs? That was my sarcastic option. But sometimes it is like inanimate objects, the elements. How do I surrender my will to that becomes nonsense. And when people are forced into 12-step programs, when those programs directly conflict with their perfectly valid belief systems, it actually harms their possibility of recovery. And so I think it's important that we call out when media focuses on 12 steps and highlight that, the people who are making these shows could, if presented with the opportunity, take it to mildly educate, do some product placement for some of the other options that are out there that aren't 12-step programs. And I've handled one case to completion on around this issue. I'm dealing with a few others. So it's sort of, yes, my soapbox, Derrick. But I will now step off my soapbox and hand it off to one of you to discuss some of the other issues.
But let me ask, let's keep on this, because if you're going to be on it, let's have some fun with it. Or I say fun. Not fun, but let's talk about the doorknob a little bit. So, like, is their goal by, and maybe you don't know this, but, like, is the goal to allow the quote-unquote higher power to be literally anything their way of getting it away from religion? Like, is that sort of the way, is that how it sort of segued? Because, like, it sounds to me like the point of the program is you have to surrender yourself to something. They've just decided it's not a religious deity? Is that sort of how these other programs work? Or, like, I'm just sort of curious.
Oh, how non-12-step programs work?
Right.
So,
or do those get away from, like, you having to surrender to anything?
Yeah, they're in, and I am by no means an expert. I do not suffer from a substance use issue. I have not gone through any of these
but you've clearly done a little bit of research on
I've done some research into 12 steps, and I am aware of the alternatives. And the key thing that whether it's 12 steps, and if 12 steps works for you, by the way, great, do it. I'm not going to tell you that it's wrong. All these programs, setting aside it like in-person one-on-one therapy and prescription medication, these programs provide community and mutual accountability. And obviously AA, NA, they do this through the 12 steps and sponsors and things like that. Whereas programs like Smart Recovery do it through just generally building a community and sort of the group therapy process among people who are suffering from these issues, and sharing coping mechanisms and being supportive when other people are in crisis and things like that. Again, not an expert in Smart Recovery, not even an expert in 12 steps, but that is essentially what these provide. It is a way of providing a support network that for a lot of people who are suffering from a substance use disorder lack.
Cool. Makes sense. Mike, anything?
No, I mean, I think that's. I don't know what
we've allowed Geoff to sort of he's going to jump back on the soapbox at some point, but this is the teaser for the remainder of the Not So Grand Jury.
I mean, it's something that he's a subject matter expert on. Like,
yes,
he says he's not an expert on 12-step programs, but like literally, you probably are at this point.
I mean, I'm an expert on the law surrounding substance use disorder to an extent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Moving on to Eli Wyms.
Yeah. So let's talk about Eli Wyms. So,
as I take a swig of ale,
I was going to comment at one point. You were saying how you need to believe in God to be, otherwise you're doomed to die an alcoholic death. Meanwhile, Derrick was like laughing, drinking a big glass of whiskey. Cheers.
Cheers.
All right. So cheers. Eli Wyms. Eli Wyms is a character in the first season of Lincoln Lawyer. No one knows why he's there. He's a MacGuffin, and we don't understand why any of these things happen because it's poorly written. Go on.
No, we kind of know why he's there.
He provides one piece of exculpatory evidence for the main trial of the show. Other than that, the entire rest of everything about him does he was decent. He was well acted. His writing was fine.
Fair, and it's really interesting. Like, you make a very good point because it is sort of put out as storyline 1B in many ways of season 1. Like, we come back to it almost every episode, at least 2 or 3 times, and it sort of starts off with we first learn of Eli Wyms when Mickey's taking his in front of a judge on a different matter, successfully gets that matter dismissed in a kind of hilarious way, but we won't need to get into that. And then once she dismisses the case, and by the way, for those who don't know the matter I'm talking about, he gets an indecent exposure case dismissed without filing a motion to dismiss by telling the judge that she can't plead because no one was offended by her, and the only reason that she showed her nakedness was because the cop ordered her out of the water. Therefore, they can't say it is an indecent exposure because the cop forced her to expose herself. Now, sure, okay, but I have a feeling the judge wouldn't just outright dismiss it, but hey, we're dealing with what we're dealing with. Anyway, immediately after he gets the dismissal, she says to him, I see I have you back in my courtroom this afternoon for Eli Wyms. He has to say to the judge, oh, of course, Eli Wyms, I will be here, Your Honor, and then immediately calls up his office to go, who the fuck is Eli Wyms? And I thought you got an understanding of his schedule and blah, blah, blah. So, step one.
Sorry.
I'll do step one if I can. And step one is, I don't know much about practicing in California because I've never practiced in California, but I am very confident if there is an active case going on, you can find out who is the lawyer for those cases in LA County, if I had to guess. But even so, apparently he has effectively taken, the theory is that Eli Wyms's folder or his file was stolen from Jerry the night that he was killed. That's, I guess, the ongoing theory that maybe is true.
Just putting a pin in it, have you guys ever had a surprise case where you show up to court for one thing and then you also have to be there for something else? Oh, I have. It's stressful.
Oh, have you? Oh,
yeah.
Tell me.
I have not.
I want to know about that.
I've had it at 2 different law firms now. So when I was doing bankruptcy work, at one point it's a high volume practice. I would show up to court and have 10 cases in a day or something. And at some point, our server was treating some emails from the court as spam.
Ooh.
So I showed up to court one day and had 3 cases that I didn't know anything about. I was like, okay, I need a continuance, Your Honor.
That's fun.
And it's in high volume practices, it happens occasionally. It literally was just Google decided to treat something as spam, and I was like, well, fuck me. No, there wasn't any harm to the client. Everything was continued, and we got them all resolved. But it was just very stressful.
I bet.
Right. I mean, I've had scenarios where when I was at my last firm where we did it, I was probably in court for at least a status conference, if not something more, at least once a week. I once in a while would get a phone call from, one of my fellow associates being like, hey, I see you're already going to this courthouse. Can you cover a second matter? I've had that happen before for a status conference. I've never showed up and been like, oh, 3 cases. That's fun. So, nope, haven't had that experience, and I'm kind of okay if I never have that experience in my life.
I've also had clients tell me the day of about a hearing where I'm going to be in court anyway, and it's I have to ask for a continuance at that point, but
yeah. Yep. That kind of is what it is. So.
I have had people reach out to me saying, I have a hearing in a week and I need an attorney. And I'm thinking, sorry. My response is, I'm very sorry. That is far too soon for me to be able to take on your case.
I also do a very specific thing. So when I'm taking on a case,
that's true. Yeah.
It either fits into this category and I take it, or I tell you to find somebody else.
Sure.
Right. And as someone who has his own practice, if I get that phone call, the answer is, if you can get your own continuance on your own accord or find a lawyer who can do it, then we can have a conversation. Yeah. But I probably can't jump into something within the next 4 business days.
Right.
No, I wouldn't want to. I mean, and as you guys know, it takes a few days just to get the conflicts all cleared and the engagement figured out, unless I want to waste a half a day to just do that, ignoring all my other clients.
Just getting up to speed on random documents. Yeah. All right. So going on, yeah. Eli Wyms. So
okay, so let's get back to Eli Wyms. We've done we've gone in one side of the lazy Susan, and we've come out the other side. So talking about Eli Wyms. So it seems like it's a completely unrelated case where they just don't have a file on him. Eli Wyms is I forget what part of the military he was in, either Army or Marines or whatever. But he apparently went off to blow some steam off, and the cops showed up, and he just started firing a lot of rounds at the cops. He fired, 90 rounds or something at the cops, something along those lines. And then, they pull him in, they put him in the patrol car, and it turns out he had a public defender, and eventually Mickey finds out, and we find this over the course of time. So, like, everything I'm telling you is something that we find out bits and pieces throughout the course of, like, 4 or 5 episodes. But effectively, we find out that he had a public defender. Then Jerry swoops in, takes the case. At first, we're not sure why, and puts him basically into a mental institution, commits him, and they pump him full of drugs, and they sort of sit him over there. We eventually find out, and this ends up becoming at least a aspect of is a major part of Mickey's defense eventually in the case, where it turns out that he was put in the back of the same exact patrol car that Trevor Elliott gets put in about 6 hours later, something along those
12
lines.
hours later.
And 12 hours later, but the car is not cleaned, so therefore it would make sense that the high amount of gunshot residue that ends up on Trevor Elliott's hands would only make sense if he was in the back of the same patrol car where someone had shot 90 rounds and his hands were on the same seat. Due to transference, if you watch the Trevor Elliott trial, you will understand exactly what I'm saying. And the sort of logic of Eli Wyms being sort of set aside, put into a mental institution, was so that Jerry could hide the ball on the gunshot residue and spring it on the prosecution at trial. That is what is sort of implied throughout the series.
I do what I have to do for my clients, man.
Really? What about Eli Wyms?
What?
People talk at the DA's office. You stuck that guy in a psych ward until you could spring him on Golans. He wasn't collateral damage.
That was Jerry. That wasn't me.
And I only know this more for a fact because the showrunner did an interview about 2 months after they released it, and he said the same thing in the interview. So this is an interview that I've seen online. This sort of supports my theory, but it still doesn't make sense. So, basically, the logic that I think the show is trying to give us is that if he had simply put the evidence into discovery, that would have allowed the prosecution to prepare for it, find a way around it, so on and so forth. I'm just going to tell you, I ain't buying that. Let's sort of, I want to talk through the perspective from Jerry Vincent and sort of explain why I think Eli Wyms makes absolutely no frickin' sense whatsoever. So, let's think of like a week before Jerry's killed. Here's Jerry Vincent's perspective as Trevor Elliott's lawyer. He has now paid a bribe to Judge Holder's husband. Well, we say husband, but Judge Holder or her husband. And he is fully aware of the fact that if he goes forward with trial at the current pace, he has at least one juror in his pocket, which we discussed last time means at worst a hung jury, possibly even a jury win without doing shit, is theoretically the whole point of all this. And then it sounds like he gets cold feet, plans to ask for a continuance, and it sounds like he's also talking to the feds about the jury rigging scheme, so therefore he has to die. So therefore either Judge Holder or her husband orders him to be killed.
No, I wanted to do right by Jerry. He was no angel, but he didn't deserve to die.
I'm sorry about that, too.
Are you? 6 figures a pop to rig a jury, that not a bad side hustle.
Excuse me?
But Jerry threw a wrench in it, so he had to go, right?
Mr. Haller, clearly I was hasty in my assessment of your state of mind. You need to get some help.
Oh, I'm stone cold sober, Your Honor. I've thought long and hard about who was behind this.
Yeah, they never clearly state why they kill him.
So,
Do they, or,
correct.
Yeah, or did I miss that?
They don't, again, this is implied. So it's implied he was killed because he asked for the continuance. And the only reason we find out he asked for a continuance was because they discovered in the scanner on Jerry Vincent's copy machine that there was a scanned version of the continuance that never got filed.
Tell me you got something.
Well, sorta. I was printing Jerry's account ledgers when I realized you can access the memory of the printer, find out what the last thing Jerry printed was.
Yes, good thinking, Lorna.
Don't get all happy yet. The day Jerry was killed, he printed a motion for continuance in the Trevor Elliott case.
So he was going to ask for a continuance after all.
But he never filed it.
I will say the showrunner confirms that they're trying to say that. The point of that was that he asked for the continuance. It was killed because of the continuance. Because again, with the continuance, they can't. The rigged juror wouldn't necessarily come through. Now let's talk about the substantive side. So prior to him getting cold feet on the substantive side, so he discovers this Eli Wyms situation and supposedly stashes him away to hide the ball and the gunshot residue. And like as I said, the theory is that if the prosecution were aware of it, they would have been able to prepare for it. That makes literally no sense to me. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The GSR is effectively one of the best things to put out there. It is such a great solid piece of evidence. Arguably so that if you had put that into discovery and shined a spotlight on it for the prosecution,
they might have dropped the case.
Arguably, the case might go away
because they don't have the gun, which is like sort of a big piece of evidence. You don't have the murder weapon.
They don't have the gun, any of the bloody clothes. Yeah. All they have is him at the premises, and like as Mickey's closing very clearly demonstrated, he had 7 minutes to go from kill to have been seen outside of his own place. And now the one thing they had, which was the gunshot residue indicating he had shot a gun, is now at least questioned, if not entirely off the table. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right? So, in my opinion, that would at least lead to potentially, getting this case off their docket and agreeing to a plea of some sort, possibly dropped entirely.
And it doesn't seem like this is one of the things where Trevor Elliott is trying to weirdly sabotage the case for more drama purposes.
Right.
Because, he was not aware of this.
No.
Now,
and it sounds like he was lucky as shit to be put in that patrol car. I mean, that's just lucky in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, I mean, yes, except then they wouldn't have had the expert saying that there's GSR on him. Like, then it would have been like, wow, he somehow is completely clean, has no blood splatter on him, has no gun residue
Correct.
on him, and we don't have a murder weapon. So it sort of ends up in the same position.
I mean, he may have opportunity and means, but they've got nothing else, right?
Motive.
And so they do, they have motive.
But I think the argument is he didn't have means in those 7 minutes to do what he would need to do.
Understood. He had opportunity and motive, but there's absolutely no means. They have proven no means other than the fact that he showed up. They have not shown that he had a gun, or that a gun was anywhere nearby, or that anything indicates he was actually there for the murder. Yeah, so from my perspective, and again, I'm not a criminal defense lawyer, but I am pretty confident that is something you shine a spotlight on to try to get this case out.
Yeah. I mean, it's the Troy McClure school of lawyering, where we'll have a series of surprise witnesses, each more surprising than the last. It's great, it's really great drama on the show. It's not good lawyering in real life, because I'm sure, in general, your client would like the case dropped, right now.
Right away.
Not, several weeks from now.
Correct. And let's be honest, Jerry's thought process, his supposed thought process, which I still don't 100% buy, his thought process is arguably more ridiculous than what Mickey actually did at trial, which we all agree was he's lucky to get some of the stuff he got in at all into the case. Jerry's is more ridiculous because he's been at the case from the very start. You're going to tell me they're going to allow you to put in this complete last minute thing about the GSR without having provided any of this shit in discovery? Mickey gets away with it in many ways because he just got on the case, and I think the judge sort of lets him get away with some of that and plays a little loosey-goosey with discovery because of it. There's no way Jerry gets away with that, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. I think it's worth also noting that there was no, even if all of that somehow made sense, having him committed and squirreled away also doesn't make any sense.
Totally irrelevant.
If Eli Wyms is convicted of, firing on police officers, all the evidence is still there.
Yeah.
Nothing bad happens.
They have, there's no additional information that's gained from him being, or not gained from him being committed versus being, arrested or pleading out or whatever. It just like it didn't benefit anything. It added a second subplot. There was something else I wanted. Like it. Oh, so what is Jerry doesn't die? How does he get this in a trial? Does he just he never submitted ahead of time? So does he say, "Oh, Your Honor, I just discovered this"? Does he lie to the court then?
So the only thing I can think of on that, and Geoff, you can feel free to jump in if you think I'm off base, is that at one point Mickey says on the witness list he adds every police officer known to man in the LA County. So I'm guessing he would have called one of them to sort of explain where the car went that day. But I think an active part of this is that the car wasn't cleaned, right? That's a big part of this. The cars are usually cleaned, I assume, after you put a suspect in the back. That would make logical sense to make sure that evidence isn't, contaminated. That guy is not on the witness list, to my knowledge. I'm not even sure if Jerry Vincent does see him, right? So Jerry Vincent gets the information from him that is shown on the video in the parking lot of the casino. But he's not listed as a witness. So I don't know.
Yeah, I think at best what's in discovery is that whole video. And the prosecution has only been looking at the part that pertains to their case, naturally. But if they look at the whole video from that videographer who happened to also be taking video of this guy, Eli Wyms, shooting off all these rounds and then getting arrested, that is in discovery.
There was an incident around 2 a.m. up in Topanga State Park. Some guy shot off a bunch of rounds at some sheriff's deputies.
Is that footage on here too?
Yes, sir.
Objection, Your Honor. Again, relevance. And this other footage wasn't turned over in discovery.
It was, actually. The entire contents of the footage Mr. Munoz shot was put into evidence, Your Honor. It's not my fault you didn't bother to watch the whole thing.
Get where you're going, Mr. Hall.
Almost there, Judge.
So he could at least talk to the videographer and point to the fact that the car is the same.
That part would actually be kind of clever. In discovery, the I don't know, not old adage, but the best advice is not you don't obscure anything in discovery, or you don't hide anything in discovery. You over disclose. You drown them in documents.
Sure.
Right. You bury them in documents, which when and if we get to season 2 of Lincoln Lawyer, that actually happens. Is there's a scene where boxes and boxes of documents are sent to Mickey's office to bury them in documents, which nowadays is more of an electronic version of that, but nevertheless.
But this would be the situation where it's oh, you want the video? Here's 40 hours of video, and it's the only relevant part is the little 3-minute thing, so you can fast forward through the rest of it. Don't worry about that.
I would even argue that if Jerry Vincent in Discovery had produced only his edited portion of the video, that would be a problem.
Yep.
So.
Correct. Right. And so, but I guess the question is, so Jerry would have maybe gotten it in through the cops and through that video that we have, but he doesn't prove the car wasn't cleaned. He doesn't prove any of that stuff. So that guy would have needed to testify, or someone would have needed to testify it wasn't cleaned. Based on his testimony, he might be one of the few that can say that.
I mean, the state, but the state would have to establish that it had been cleaned, and then he could call that guy in rebuttal to whatever witness that they called. Now that's plausible.
Right. It's plausible.
But also totally unnecessary because of all the stuff Derrick just said.
Right. He is preparing for...
Also, we don't know that Jerry even spoke... Does Jerry know that the car wasn't cleaned? Did he has the videographer, but we don't know. Did he speak to the maintenance guy? He did.
He did, because we have that. That's the one thing they have from the casino video surveillance in the parking lot is so that was, I think, I'm gonna say it was around episode 4 or 5, maybe even 6, where they see Jerry in his car talking to this guy, but they still are not sure who that guy is. They think he's part of the casino. And then when Mickey goes over there one night and sees that the cars get impounded, the police cars go to the lot next door, that's when he discovers the connection. But yeah, so presumably Jerry learns that. But we all said, when we all take a case you are mentally prepared to go to trial, right? Like, you want to mentally prepare for trial. That is how you go through the case, is assuming you're going to have to put testimony on eventually. We all know that about 99.5% of cases do not go to trial, and you want the case to not have to go to trial. You don't want to throw this up in the air for 12 random people to be able to decide. You want the case to get kicked out as early as humanly possible on the defense side, or you want to get a good plea in the state's favor if you're on the prosecution side. If you had shined the spotlight on this evidence, I am very confident they could have come together with a plea that probably doesn't involve jail time, but they get something out of it, right? Or even they drop it. They might even just drop it and say it's not worth taking this case. That prosecutor, prior to him losing this case, was supposedly undefeated, according to Mickey's second wife, first wife.
I've totally forgotten that. I hate that trope.
Yeah. Okay, I hate the perfect record trope. I agree on that, but it also shows that prosecutors don't jump into trial unless they are ready. Like, they don't go to trial unless they assume they're going to win. It's wasted resources.
I will say Trevor Elliott, like the character that we're shown, he's not taking a plea deal, even if it's nothing. He wants, now if we're aware of this, maybe, for plot reasons, he would say, no, I want to go to trial and then surprise him with it. But that character wasn't taking a plea deal for manslaughter or anything,
Well, I don't think he certainly wasn't going to do jail time.
No, he wanted to prove. Like he repeatedly said, he needs to prove himself innocent. This is
right.
It's nonsense and it's poorly written, but that is the character is very clearly established that under no situation is he pleading to anything.
Right, because we know that no one can make money unless, in the court of public opinion, you are found not guilty. Because no one who has all committed any crimes makes money in the United States.
He was planning on publishing a book afterwards called "If I Did It," and then it would have involved a drone. It would have instructions on how to use the drone in there.
At the end of the season, Mickey does something unclear to me to get Eli Wyms out of the mental health facility that he's been placed in.
Hand waving.
Right. He filed a motion, and that was that. What does Eli Wyms do next? Does he sue Jerry Vincent's estate? Does he sue Mickey for keeping him in there? What do you think his next step is?
Well, so he accepts a 1-year plea deal, right?
That sounds right, but I don't have. I don't have that in my notes.
So he accepts a 1-year plea deal, presumably. So here's what's interesting, and this is a very good question, Geoff, because Mickey is his lawyer,
mm-hmm.
and Mickey has now signed an affidavit that he's given to him that basically says Jerry Vincent effed up and probably committed malpractice, is what I'm guessing.
Yeah,
is that affidavit says without. It says all the required elements without saying that.
He advised him that you can sue the malpractice insurance. You can sue the estate for the malpractice insurance.
Correct.
Oh, does he? Okay.
Yeah.
So he advises him of that. So I guess he has to get a different lawyer to sue Jerry Vincent's estate. Now, query, which I have not looked up, can he sue a lawyer's estate and get to the malpractice? Because the malpractice is presumably with the entity.
Which is now Mickey's.
When you inherit somebody's law firm, do you inherit their malpractice insurance?
I mean, that's a conversation with... I guess it depends upon if you have past acts and bad acts insurance and all other things, as I would recall. As someone who has re-upped his malpractice insurance recently, I can tell you that anything that's happened before is included as part of my insurance. I don't know how that works.
Does it die?
And I'm okay. And I'm okay with not knowing how that works.
You would think that there would be some way to go after, because maybe you don't know about the malpractice until years later. So there has to be some way to go back to it, even if the attorney's dead or
right. But I actually don't think it's suing the estate. I think it's suing the formerly known as Jerry Vincent and Associates.
I've always thought about what happens if your estate attorney fucks up. just because like it's a situation where like you might not realize it for 30 years later. It's like, so like the attorney might be dead for a decade. Who do you go after at that point? And I have no idea. Not an area I practice, not an area I've ever really touched. The only reason it first came up in my family because my grandmother passed away, and we realized the copy of the will she had was unsigned by anyone. And we're like, fuck, how do we do this? And we tracked down the attorney that had signed it, who was 90 years old and still fucking practicing. And he had the original blue ink. So
that's good.
Yeah, but it was just like, well, this crypt keeper-like figure that is still practicing law has all of his documents. Good for him.
So I will say, having worked previously very closely with a firm that did a lot of estate planning and whatnot. Well, let me back up. It's normal practice in private practice, at least in the jurisdiction I was practicing in, where 7 years after a file is closed, you can dispose of it, because at that point the statute of limitations for a malpractice claim has run. Any appeals, that case is not going to be reopened. You offer the client a copy of their file, and then you can dispose of it. However, with estate planning, you have to retain those records, because the estate is still, the person isn't dead yet or what have you. So even if someone died, as long as the firm still existed, then they would still have that paperwork, presumably, until 7 years after the estate was fully settled. Now, if the firm went out of business...
So I guess that's the question. So, like, we have a scenario where, one, let's be honest, not much time has transferred since Jerry Vincent dying versus this situation happening.
The estate still exists. Like,
a personal rep may not even have been appointed yet.
But if we assume that from the day Mickey gets the Trevor Elliott case till it's first heard, it's a week, and then there's maybe 4 days of trial after that. So it's been maybe a day or two here, maybe it's been 2 weeks, maybe a day or two more at most.
Right. So they might not even have applied for a personal rep yet. I mean, this can take time.
Yeah. So there's still an estate you could probably grab onto. Does the malpractice insurance a tie to the estate? That actually would make sense if it did that, because you could still sue the estate for that, and then the malpractice insurance would step in. I guess that's how it would happen. That is some weird litigation. I don't know.
Yeah, and by the way, this is why we have estate attorneys who can.
That's the trial I want to see. This is like.
I want to see the evidence put up regarding Jerry Vincent's the case against Jerry Vincent for malpractice.
Yeah,
that sounds.
This is season 4. Just this every single day. They're just pouring over documents, some settlement offers going back and forth. Really, just chewing the fucking leather on it. Just I'm in.
Hi everyone, Derrick here with a brief message. The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by my law firm, Morwa P. LLC. One of Morwa PLC's many practice areas is business law. If you are a business owner or someone who is thinking of starting up a new or side business, you need a legal team who can efficiently provide you legal counsel, keeping you and your business away from potential legal issues, and if necessary, representing you in any disputes that do arise. We pride ourselves on being cost efficient while also getting to know our clients. If you want less stress and more support, you need more law. If you would like to set up a free consult, please click on the link in the show notes, visit our website, www.mooreatty.com, that's mooreatty.com, or email us at contact@mooreatty.com. And now, back to the show.
If you want a political topic, electing DAs, it's problematic. There's a whole subplot with the ex-wife number 1 and her boss campaigning, and this is one of those things where there's no good way to appoint a prosecutor. I think maybe the most public example we're seeing right now is what's going on in Georgia, where it doesn't look like what's Fonnie Willis's title? Is she DA or is she a prosecutor?
No, she's district attorney.
And some of her decision making is not ideal, and in some cases it's because of elections.
Yeah.
don't know if that's a controversial take or not, but
No, I don't think you're terribly far off.
yeah.
I mean, it's either going to be an election or an appointed official by someone.
Also
who's
problematic.
elected.
Yeah, it's one of those lines where what was the Churchill line? Democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. Like, there's no good way to do this. Appointed prosecutors, Bill Barr was essentially an appointed prosecutor. Bill Barr was corrupt as hell.
Sure. Yeah, I don't know. It would be interesting. Well, now I'm just going to throw out ideas for, it used to be that if you didn't have a public defender's office, just an attorney would be appointed to serve as your public defender. It would be interesting if a criminal case is filed with the court by law enforcement and the court appoints a prosecutor and appoints a public defender. That would never work.
Oh, man.
But that would be interesting.
You would incentivize, because everyone would try and get it out of their pro bono hours as quickly as possible. And I guess more things would settle.
I mean, we could talk. We could talk about the Detective Griggs and the amount of ridiculous shit he did over the course of the 10 episodes, including showing Mickey a picture of a guy who supposedly might be a person of interest, where it's just complete bullshit, and then having that guy scare him.
I forgot about that.
And
who was that
then
guy?
Just a guy.
Just a guy.
So,
It's just a guy.
It's just
and
a guy.
Then, Mickey fires a gun at him.
Shoots at him a couple times through the door.
I mean, not unreasonably. The position he's in, I totally understand where he's coming
that
from.
plot line is totally dropped also. That is...
Well, because it's so ridiculous, you're just like, let's moving on. Because also, Geoff, feel free to tell the backstory.
For listeners, Detective... say his name again? Griggs. Detective Griggs is investigating the death of Jerry Vincent. And
Hold on, I need to pour more bourbon for this. Okay. Keep going, Geoff.
He's investigating the death of Jerry Vincent. He presents Mickey with a photo of the suspect, supposedly. And then the suspect is someone that he has hired, or maybe another police officer or something, to follow Mickey around to make Mickey scared enough that he'll provide more information to the cops. And then the guy shows up outside Mickey's office because that's what he's been paid to do. And Mickey, not surprisingly, freaks the fuck out because this is right where essentially the same spot where Jerry Vincent was killed. He thinks by this same person.
Yeah.
Right.
Meanwhile, Griggs is following him as well and is 2 minutes away.
Right. So Mickey pieces this together very quickly, by the way.
Sorry I'm late. Can't valet a city car. What?
It was the lights, wasn't it?
What lights?
You were waiting for me outside. That's how you got to me so fast. You saw me turn out the lights in my office. That's when you knew I was heading for the garage where your guy was waiting for me. Photo gave it away. You said you would bring it by the office to show Jerry's assistant, but you never came.
Yeah, I got tied up.
Yeah, bullshit. This photo was intended for an audience of one, me. But the clincher was this. I asked my investigator to look into your suspect. He's got a source in the LAPD. But as soon as he asked about the photo, his source, he just dried up. That's because they asked you about it, didn't they? Or you used this to smoke out a leak. You set me up.
So, as you recall,
afterward, yeah.
Mickey sees this guy in the parking garage, runs away up to his office, grabs the gun that Cisco has put into his desk for protection.
Very conveniently the same episode.
Completely conveniently.
Yeah.
Mickey fires at him through the door, presumably doesn't hit him, we assume, and then he calls Griggs. Griggs shows up 5 minutes later, and that's probably from him waiting 4 minutes, and then he shows up a minute later. Go for it, Mike.
No, I'm just reminded of the writers from 6 Feet Under in some interviews were talking about how like you just don't have like one scene where like the married couple gets into a fight and the next scene the husband cheats on the wife. You have the first scene, you have like 4 other scenes, and then you have the husband cheat. And like this show has never learned that lesson. This show is like lead up, conclusion, like set up, punchline right away. Like.
By the way, for our viewers, I love that Mike breaks out the most random of other shows.
Watch a lot of
ever.
TV growing up.
It's fantastic.
And it's fantastic, and I love it. But it's great because when Geoff does a segue, I can know where he's going, generally speaking. Mike, no fucking clue. Just for the record. So this is actually really fun. When he goes, oh, I have something. I'm like, oh, good. This could go in any direction, which is fun. But to get back to it, so... So Griggs shows up and basically tries to get more information out of Mickey. They end up going to some steakhouse that apparently Mickey knows so well he can call him up and keep the kitchen open.
I was about to go get something to eat. Want to join? What? Got here in under 5. Least I can do is buy you a steak. You know Taylor's on 8th?
Yeah.
I'll keep the kitchen open if I call.
I would like that steakhouse in my life, for the record.
Before they leave his office, they both pull their guns on the guy who's supposed to take the trash.
Forgot about that.
Which leads to another subplot.
And why is Griggs pulling his gun on the guy?
When he literally knows there's no one
knows.
there. He's got to go with the acting, Geoff.
I guess, yeah.
He's a bad actor, and he's a bad actor.
I'm having to resist making Lethal Weapon references now.
Just random notes I have. This is way back in episode 2.
Wait. Before we finish this, I just want to note for the record that they go to this random steakhouse, and apparently on the drive to the steakhouse, Mickey figures it out that this guy's an actor. Griggs has been watching him, and he confronts him in the steakhouse on that. Now, we can assume that he's the greatest defense lawyer on the planet, but like when he thinks he just got shot at, or like, you know, went after somebody and he shoots at them, you wouldn't think he's thinking that clearly to be able to put all the pieces together within a matter of minutes.
I'm going to be honest, I don't remember this scene super well. I don't remember him being confronted about hiring an actor. I thought that he was confronting him because Griggs got there so fast that he thought Griggs had been watching. Okay.
Like he literally says to him, he actually points at the photo of the guy and said, this was for an audience of 1, me. Because he puts that together, as well as he notices that when he tries to take a picture of the photo, Griggs doesn't let him. And then when he tells Griggs to come by later that day to show the photo to his office, he also doesn't come by. So literally, Griggs does not want anyone else to know that this is just a made-up human. So anyway, that is, and as Mike said, this all gets resolved within a matter of like 17 minutes of TV time, with multiple other sort of things that happen in between. It's ridiculously bonkers problematic. Like, that's insane. I know cops are allowed to lie a lot. I don't think you're allowed to do that and create, scenarios where a person of interest would shoot at somebody. I don't think that's how that works. What do I know? It's just a lot.
I mean, maybe we're in an Air Bud situation and there's not necessarily a rule against it.
I
mean, so police can't engage a private citizen to do something that they couldn't themselves legally do. They could, Griggs could follow Mickey, so he could hire someone to follow Mickey. Okay. Probably some policies being violated there, but okay. He can show Mickey a photo of a suspect, claim it's a suspect when he knows it's not, because cops can do that. I think the only thing he couldn't do is charge Mickey with a crime for shooting the gun at the guy. Because that would be entrapment.
But can he hire, like, the photo he shows, can he then have that guy appear near Mickey? Like, that seems like That seems problematic. But by the way, for the record, then they have, so he confronts him, and then the thing they decide to do is to have Mickey then lie to a reporter to claim that he has all of the stuff backed up in hopes that this will get someone to come out of the woodwork to say, we know you don't have this backed up, that's a lie, and that's how they go after this other investigator. The amount of random A to B to C to D things that happen that lead nowhere, by the way, is kind of hilarious. All right. So, shall we jump into the rankings?
Go for it.
Yeah, let's go for it. I don't have anything else.
Okay. So, all right, let's talk about enjoyment. So, I'm going to have a hard time figuring out a number here because, like, I agree with Mike. There are certain parts of the show that are cringeworthy from a legal side. And I know we're not just talking about the legal here, but obviously part of the enjoyment is it being legally correct, especially when this is such a legally heavy show. Like, it's not like some of our past episodes where we're talking about a show that has nothing to do with the law, and oh, by the way, we're talking about the law. This is a heavily legal show. I am watching it because I actually enjoy that aspect of it. However, I do think episodes 1 and 2 and parts of 3 are a little dense and a little slow. I do think, like, there are certain episodes that are a lot of interest. They're very interesting, and I won't lie, as we started getting through the trial, I'm like, where the hell is he going, and how is this trial going to get resolved? Which I do find very entertaining, even if I think the legal aspect is out. I'm going to put the enjoyment part at, I'll say 5. I'm going to go with a 5. I will say, I watch it a lot over and over again as my white noise in the background while I'm working, so I'm not actively paying attention to certain aspects of it. I actually, like, I think it's entertaining. I do think the general concept is interesting. I go back to the fact that I love that he talked about the voir dire stuff. I think, there are certain parts of it that are really, really intriguing. I'm going to go with a 5. I think that's probably on the high end, but I'll go with it. I'm not going to go into the legal stuff. I'll let you guys do the enjoyment
I'll jump
first.
in next because I think I know where Mike's going, and we'll let him wrap up the entertainment ranking. But I enjoyed it watching it once. It was a slog watching it a second time. I think I'm going to give it a 4. I don't have any intention of watching it again because there are some shows that are in this vein that I will, like what you said, Derek, put it on in the back. Like Lucifer, I enjoy the hell out of it. Makes no fucking sense, but I enjoy Lucifer. And I'll just put that on because, I need something on in the background to drown out the tinnitus. This would not be one of those. So I certainly can't give it a majority, but I did enjoy it while I watched it the first time. So I'll give it a 4.
Jeff, do you watch Sandman?
Yeah.
Okay. Connected universe.
Yep.
I'm actually higher in this than you think I am. All right. So if it was the first 2 episodes, that's a 1. Those are bad. Those are bad. I'm surprised that you watched past those 2 episodes. It does get better. I actually will probably give it a 4. I think that there's like some good stuff in there. There's also like, even if it were just those first 2 episodes, that's still 20% of the show is really, really bad. And then there's some bad stuff mixed in with the rest of it. So I'm going to give it 4 out of 9 justices. Where it's like, there's some watchable bits in there. If you could.
Yeah. Well, and fair enough. And I will say, like, some of my favorite shows of all time, and a good example is The Wire, like, the first couple episodes, it's a little bit of a slog to get through, and there are certain things that fly after that, right? So you get to episodes 3, 4, or 5, and all of a sudden you're off and running. This obviously gets better. It doesn't go that high. I'm not going to be completely ridiculous, but once you get through the first couple episodes, I think it starts getting there, and I think once you get into the trial, it actually gets really interesting from my perspective. On the legal side, all right. So we have to combine everything. So combining everything from season 1 on the legal side, I think they get certain things very right. Like, I do think that the general overview of voir dire is very well done. I think, honestly, they do a pretty decent job of sort of explaining like how a solo practiced lawyer in the criminal side would have to be dealing with all these different, in-person appearances, trying to juggle clients. The act of him trying to get Trevor Elliott's a very interesting and probably semi-realistic thing in terms of you have to appease the client, and given that he was not going to, he wasn't going to retain him unless he agreed to not do a continuance, blah, blah, blah. Certain aspects are really interesting, and probably correct. Some of the conversations with the judges in their chambers are very realistic. Like, I still remember that one case, with the judge in the Trevor Elliott case, where he literally looks at him and goes, "I'm offering you a continuance, and the other side is clearly on board." Like, looking at him like, how are you not taking this? I have been in those status conferences where the judge looks at you in the face and goes, "You're gonna say yes, right, you moron? Like, I'm going to make you do this." Like, there are some very realistic things. There's also some very unrealistic things. We've already discussed how some of the aspects of the trial are completely unridiculous. Are not unridiculous, completely ridiculous, and they are unrealistic. I am overall trying to figure out how he actually makes money at his practice during season 1, given the amount of employees and everything else that runs through his firm.
I hope Trevor Elliott paid him in full before he died.
Well, so Trevor Elliott paid Jerry. It's unclear how much money is actually in Jerry's account. But
because he took $100,000 out to bribe a judge.
Correct. So, like, he had paid this retainer and paid whatever. It is unclear how he makes his practice run based on what we see. But that's sort of is what it is. We can get into that more specifically if we ever jump into season 2, because we get a little bit more information in season 2 on how his practice goes. I'm going to say, I'm going to go with a 5. And I say that because I do think it is slightly more realistic than other legal-ish cop shows, things like on that nature that we've seen previously. And it gets a lot of things right. It gets a lot of things wrong. It's kind of expected. So I'm going to stick around the sort of 5 range.
Geoff, you want to go?
Yeah, I think I gave it a 4 last time, because I gave part 1, the Trevor Elliott trial, a 4. Nothing we've discussed has moved me from that number, so I'm gonna stay there. It is interesting how you mentioned $100,000 for a bribe for a judge coming out of his attorney's accounts. There are some bizarre parallels between this show and the Trump trial, and it's really weird.
Well, that'll be a nice show to watch too, the Trump trial.
Yeah. So a 4.
Yeah. I'm kind of stuck on that. Like, most of the B plots, we all agree they got the things wrong. So Eli Wyms, or like any of these random hearings he goes to, except maybe the very first one, it doesn't make sense how he won. And that's like a huge chunk of the time. And on top of it, there's just like a bunch of like the main plot stuff that are like, that wouldn't work like that, or like that would be malpractice if he did it like that. I'll give it a 4 just because, like, I thought the trial was like they did voir dire right. They did voir dire right. My only issue with voir dire is that it involves someone being a psychic and reading people. I'll give it a 4. I'm just
fair enough.
Stuck with that one, I guess.
Okay.
It's not like the worst thing I've ever seen. I'm not offended, but there's a lot of stuff that would be malpractice. I don't know.
So in other words, you guys are going on the side of the liberal judges who have somehow convinced Roberts to join them on the dissent, and then
actually, I'm gonna drop it to
the
3.
side.
Fuck Roberts.
Mike wants to just be on the liberal side of the justices,
Yeah, sure.
and let all the conservatives stay on the majority side. Fair enough. Cool. That was fun. By the way, poor Eli Wyms. Like,
yeah. The plea deal makes sense. He
the 1 year you can't shoot 90 rounds near cops and expect to not have to be in jail.
I mean, even before that, it was like, I don't know, dude. You're just shooting wildly. Like, you're in LA County. Presumably, this is not like the fucking woods. Like, it's dangerous. Like, you should go to a fucking rifle range. I don't know. So, yeah, a plea deal totally makes sense. Fucking going to a fucking mental institution and getting pumped full of drugs for how long was he there? We don't know.
A while.
Yeah.
Let's just say a significant period of time.
Because of just like, not just like malpractice, but like genuinely criminal behavior. Like
unethical and criminal behavior.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes. But anywho, good times.
Good times.
The Not So Grand Jury is sponsored by Morwa P. LLC.
The opinions expressed in the Not So Grand Jury are those of the hosts themselves and not of their respective employers.
The theme music for the Not So Grand Jury is from Gustav Holst's Jupiter and is in the public domain.
If you'd like to get in touch with us, if you want to suggest future movies, or even if you want to offer corrections, you can email us at notsograndjury@gmail.com or message us on any of our social media accounts.
The Not So Grand Jury is copyright 2024, all rights reserved.